Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games, back at it. CMON, this week, number 20 through number 11. Gonna be some controversial ones and gonna be some disagreement in this one, but check it out. Let's get right to it. Now, number 20, Blood Rage, the digital. Because the digital gave something that we had not been able to get for a long time. It gave access to exclusives that the original Blood Rage campaign was really the only source and access for, bar something else coming up next. And that is really why it stands out. It's a re-implementation in a slightly different way, in a slightly different form, with a few more extra promos, exclusives that had been going for Godzook's amount of money on the secondary market, which are still going for Godzook's amount of money on the secondary market. And you can make the argument that this is probably the most complete CMON game with just the core, without the promos. But the reason this is so high is because it gave access to all of this other stuff. All of the stuff that people had been wanting for, missing out, gave it as alternate sculpts so you didn't feel like you were missing out if you didn't get the first time around, that you were still getting it, but you were still getting something unique. It gave a digital version too, but let's be frank, the most reason people got it is they wanted the exclusives. They also wanted a copy of the base game. They wanted a copy of a little bit of these extras, like the first player token and the new ones in the Gods of Asgard. So that's really why. It's still quite a popular, hot commodity on the retail side of things. And this, just proved it. For how niche of an area control game this is, it raised, $750,000. So that's really good considering the base price pledge was about $60. So there you go. Now, number 19, I just mentioned this and I alluded to it. The CMON Time Machine. This was probably one of the most ill-organized situations when the actual pledge manager came out. But this also gave allowances for people that had missed all of these previous campaigns to get a second chance at the exclusives. It gave a lot of people, without having to pay exorbitant costs on the secondary market, access to things that they had been clamoring for and wanting for years, that they had been saying, CMON, you have literally a cash cow. Print the exclusives again, do it on a Kickstarter, do it on any Kickstarter, and we will pay money for it. Now, there's a whole debacle about things getting taken out of people's carts when they were trying to fill them, but weren't finished with them, and going back and losing them and other people getting them. So it was not as well executed as it nearly should have been. But the reason it only raised $296,000 was a lot of people like me did the $1 Time Vault pledge, because that's all you needed to get in on the manager in the first place. So that's really the importance of it. And they just gave access to a lot of stuff that people wanted in terms of this and everything else you can see here that was previous exclusive. And this was actually just a portion of things. A lot of stuff, I don't even know. I checked like a year ago or so, and it seemed like you could still get in on some of this stuff. Now, Miniature Market had a sale over the past year or so of random of these games, like they were trying to burn through some stock that CMON had in the back warehouse. So I'm not sure what is remaining of this side of things, but especially having done this once, I can easily see them pulling this out of the back pocket again in another year or 2 or 3 to do the exact same thing. Now we're going to stick with the unconventionals here at number 18, and this is the CMON, again, Animation Collection, which is not delivered at this point. But again, it's got 2 very good things going for it. 1, massive IP recognition. 3 unique games in some sort of different manner, where you have the Teen Titans and the Looney Tunes entering sort of the a la the Unmatched or those style of games, trying to break into that side of things. And I would also argue the Scooby-Doo, especially with the deluxe version and these pre-painted miniatures, could be very, very, very good. Could be one of the best games on this whole roundup when it actually comes to people, at least from my side of things, as a cooperative, puzzle-esque, harder than Pandemic style game. And again, it's probably easily going to be the best Scooby-Doo game out there, which is sort of a low bar, having played most of them. But it's going to be interesting to see, because you could tell that they were really structuring this one around differently than they have with a lot of other previous campaigns, where this one was going to be more heavily appealing at the retail side of things as much as it was potentially on the Kickstarter side of things. Again, we'll see. It was an expensive price point, $50 for those and $80 for the Scooby-Doo. And again, there was plenty of exclusives in terms of some of the extras, but again, not anything that you would maybe feel like you're totally lost without at the retail side of things as well. So that is going to be very interesting. I am super excited about this one. This is probably one of the most excited games that I'm waiting for in terms of Scooby-Doo. Just because I'm a huge fan of the IP, I'm a huge fan of hard cooperative games, and I think this really clicks both. But I think it's going to be interesting to see if this is more in line with Blood Rage, like we were just talking about, that gives CMON a little bit more on the retail side of presence, now that we've also seen them go that way with other properties like Marvel United. That's why it's where it is. Number 17, now I'm going to make Zombicide Undead or Alive, because this was sort of a little bit of revitalization for the Zombicide things that Invaders sort of wasn't quite as appealing, I think, wide mass appeal, and we really hadn't seen anything Western-ish. There's not a lot of Western-themed games out there, and so a lot of people were very interested, especially with the 2.0 streamed rules, with the new classes, with the new ways of the train interacting and going across the board, and just a little bit of everything slightly different as opposed to all the other very same iterations of Zombicide that we had seen previously with slight or lesser tweaks. And again, it made it more interesting in terms of how the hordes are working, what you're getting, I mean, is usually always the same, but they added enough, again, with the videos available, with the rulebook available right at the beginning. It made it a little bit more accessible, a little bit more appealing for something that people had been maybe potentially a little bit weary of with so many iterations and so many versions. So people were pleasantly surprised by this, and you can see that with the $3.3 million funding that they got. Again, I mean, how different is it from other Zombicides in the first place? Do you need this one over other ones? I mean, yeah, I mean, you can make that debate that, you probably don't, but they're bringing a lot of new stuff in with the Western, the steampunk, and that side of things, and that's a theme that is, again, underrated and underutilized, so people were really interested from that side of things, and that's why it's number 17. Number 16 is going to be right along those lines, and I dare say that this is probably the most well-regarded of any of the Zombicides out there. And again, you can tell me how wrong I am as a non-super deep Zombicide fanboy, but this is the one that I still see going for the most on the secondary market, that is the most sought after on the secondary market when I'm viewing posts and sales across the internet webs. So that's why it's really there, and it's just got some cool fantasy mechanics. This is the stereotypical, prototypical situation where fantasy is the biggest attractor to a lot of these games, and then they just applied it right to their core product in the first place. Spells, zombies, everything else in between, dragons, orcs, were-zombies, Gorgomination, whatever that is, chromatids, chromatiz, just all sorts of cool stuff. I mean, this is by far the most appealing for any of the fantasy-esque realms interest. This is by far the most appealing from that side of things. And so from a dungeon crawl and a fantasy side with zombies all at the same time, especially with some of these big dragon-like creatures, it's still very sought after, and it's still very worth thought of. And that's also why it raised one of the most Zombicide money on any of these campaigns of $5 million, even back then in like 2016. So that's impressive, and that's why it's number 16. Now, number 15, we're going way back. One of the earlier games from CMON as well, and a complete departure from almost everything we have seen since. There really hasn't been one like it, where CMON has put out Dogs of War, a Euro-style soldier placement with deception and alliances. We really haven't seen those mechanisms in combination, especially from the Euro side of things, in really any of the other games since then, for the most part. Again, probably the lowest one on this list, but one that has stood at a retail side of things, that when people say, what's an underrated, underappreciated gem of a Euro game, this is one that you will inevitably see pop up on a lot of lists. And because it's from CMON, the wrap with it goes with a lot of their plastic and their miniature, and not necessarily the game depth, this one sort of bucked the trend. The exclusive captains and some of those are a little bit harder to get, but like with the time machine, we saw a lot of access to it. And so it just took things in a completely different direction than people were thinking and people were used to. And as a non-Euro person, I have seen this pop up, like I said, plenty of places where people are espouting its virtues and how interesting and different in a good way that this game is. And so for doing something outside of the norm that definitely worked for them, at least in terms of design and gameplay, maybe not funding, obviously, that's why Dogs of War is 15 on this list. Now, number 14, we're going to go back to some of the big ones. 14, Arcadia Quest Inferno. Again, only $1.7 million, but you can argue that this took everything that people liked about Arcadia Quest and just added more. Just added more. Now, again, some people, more too much, too many things in terms of complicating it and dragging it out. And, you know, although there was more of the campaign element and the demons and more of the angel dynamic and all of the dragon expansions. And this is when we saw CMON really buckle down into the exclusives within each of the expansions, which made you want to feel like you needed the expansions, because otherwise you're going to miss out on like the one exclusive monster that was in each of these expansions, and the pets expansion, which is still going for like 2 times the price on retail side of things already. Just adding a lot of stuff, different dynamics, and basically giving you the option to create your own style of Arcadia Quest in whatever way you chose. In multiple different iterations, multiple different ways, multiple things that you're never going to ever play through. But this was it, and this was sort of the big follow-up to the sleeper hit of Arcadia Quest in the first place. You could get some of the stuff from the first campaign again, which was something new that they hadn't really done. And again, it's just Inferno. It just was a sequel to one of the better rated, easy, chibi skirmish games out there. So it had the good pedigree. It's still relatively well thought of. It's easier to get because a lot of people got it and because there were a lot of extra copies. But it's there for a reason. There you go, number 14. Now, number 13, lucky number 13 here is The Others. This is one of my personal favorite games. I think this is one of the most highly underrated CMON games for many different reasons. But the fact that it's just a slug 'em out 1v all, where it's not very strategic, you just go, baby. You blow them up, you fully let loose all the powers that you got every single turn, and you go full throttle down, gas pedal hitting the floor. And then you see who can do it better, the one or the all. Again, wasn't really marketed that well because there weren't 7 sins in the base game, and that sort of was a little misleading. And so you had to buy all the other like 5 expansions to get with it, and the 3 or 4 other teams, and the Apocalypse expansion, and the Men of Faith expansion, and the Ragnarok, you know, that whole thing. But again, very well thought of. I love it. Again, it's a very niche game. Not everyone's going to love this. Not everyone's going to want this. This would not be as high on many other people's lists, I feel like. But again, this was something that we had not seen from them to that standpoint. This was something that was really a little bit different. We saw really a more use of the exploder dice in this game, and just kind of this open map simulation between the good guys and the bad guys with a mix and match. So again, all in all, super like this game. Very good for what it was and what it is, and haven't really seen too much sense of it except for one other on this list that we'll talk about shortly. That's why it's number 13. Number 12. This might be the most controversial on the list. I'm putting Trudvang Legends number 12 of the best games, when we don't even know half of what the game is at this point. They redid the whole game after the campaign ended. But I think they're going to put out a game that is going to be one of the best story-driven adventures with this bag-pulling, pressure luck mechanism with a little bit of dice style of things, with a Norse mythology that is highly underused than we've seen in years. I mean, I think this is going to rival the best story narrative games out there on the market now. And again, I could be completely wrong. And again, it could completely blow up in my face. But this was also the one campaign where all of a sudden they started losing money. And this was also of note, and the other importance is, since this campaign, they have gone away from what they had done previously in almost every single campaign before that, where it was purely monetary stretch goals that were arbitrarily spaced out further and further and further and further and further and further to drive this stretch goal never-ending horizon until the very last seconds of the very last day, which again is not really that appealing anymore nowadays. And then they had to introduce the daily unlocks, and we have seen daily unlocks on every single campaign since then due to this, which you can make an argument has been a much better thing in terms of potential FOMO, at least from knowing about them. Again, this is going to be crazy. This is going to be interesting. I'm all in, so I'm biased on a lot of these games, but I think this has the true potential to be something good because they didn't just push out a half project and they actually said, you know what, guys, we screwed up. We're taking responsibility. Mea culpa. We're building this back up from the ground up. It's going to be way late. But as I have heard said in many other areas, in many other ways, in many other projects, a bad game delivered on time or close to that is forever going to be a bad game. A great game delayed will be a great game. You just got to wait for it. That's what I'm hoping with this. With the campaign, with the stories, with the storybooks that you're going to be going through these different lands and the Westmark and the Darkwoods and all of this stuff. I think it's going to bring something tremendous if they can really fulfill the potential. This has one of the highest ceilings of any of the games that we have seen in the past from CMON in terms of what it may offer, along the lines of even something like Sleeping Gods or Role Player Adventures or something of that ilk that has come out recently. That is what this makes me think of. Now, again, do we need all the miniatures? No, we really don't. Those other games don't have it. But I'm hoping that with these bag building-esque mechanisms, they're really giving us something different from that side of things, as well as the theme and the creatures, all completely different than what we see elsewhere, all completely in this Norse mythology. And so I'm super excited by it, especially with the fact that you're getting this many cards and not just a whole lot of other stuff too. So there you go. That's why it's number 12. Number 11, this one's also very interesting. This is Project Elite. This is a redo version of the sought after, but aesthetically very, very poor original Project Elite, where CMON took it and said, we will take the game, we will tweak it, and we will actually make it aesthetically pleasing instead of getting miniatures that look like they're half melted in the sun. And this is, again, not for everybody. It's frantic, it's dice rolling, it's real time. People hate real time. As more I've talked about it, the more I realize that. I love it though. And it brings something completely new, completely different than anything else out there on the board game market. And that is why I love it. That is why it deserves such a high spot. Again, it didn't raise a ton of money. $634,000 is not a ton compared to a lot of these other projects, but it's doing something cool and unique that you either love or hate. So it went for it. It achieved it, I think. And it's a game that will not play like anything else in your collection. And it's worth just chaotic dice rolling fun. And sometimes you just want to do stuff like that and just relax. And so, well, as much as you can relax in a real-time game, but it just took this and made it just that much better all around, I'll argue. So that's why it's number 11 on the list. Now, number 10. That's it. 20 through 11. Let me know what you think. I wasn't kidding about that. So you can narrow it down to what's in the top 10. Top 10 video coming out next week. So if you're interested, stay tuned, subscribe, check it out. Stay classy. I'll see you around.